Ryan and Christopher are ready. So guys, it's all yours again.
Thank you. Okay, welcome back everybody. We're here with our second group now to talk about how to think about responsible gambling advertising. So we're delighted to be joined by Thomas Mattsson, Peter Paul, Hubert Rovers and Brigid Simmonds. So our first question centres around gambling advertising in football. Recently we heard that the UK government may ban all gambling sponsors from the front of shirts. Hubert, we'll start with you on this one. What is your take on gambling advertising in football? And perhaps more so for Peter Paul, what impact do you think a crackdown on advertising will have on football and indeed the industry?
Shall I start with that one? Yeah, for me, well, marketing of any product, and including gambling, has a purpose to bring people to the product. So I think also in this area, you need to be able to market your product in a right and in a responsible way. Within the industry, I think you need to be really careful about placing logos on shirts under 18s squads, or having logos at the child sections of football clubs. But I think in general, it should be possible for the gambling industry to market their product, and also to make sure that the customer comes to the regulated companies as well.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I completely agree with Hubert. From a Netherlands point of view, our market has just been regulated. So the online gambling market has been regulated, or the market has been opened per the 1st of October, so not even a week in. And to crack down on sponsorship of football jerseys would be definitely the wrong message, I think. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're not inundating the viewers and the fans with too much. So we need to tread carefully here, because we definitely don't want to cross the lines of irritation, if you will. But yes, it's advertising and sponsorship are very, very important to channel players away from the illegal offer towards the regulated and licensed offer. And especially in a nation market as the Netherlands, it is very important that consumers know what legal brands are out there, where they can gamble safely, and do so under a license and under protection of the Dutch government.
Thanks. I mean, it's an interesting answer. I mean, if I just bring in my own personal experience here for a minute, I think, I didn't gamble till I was 30. That was the first time. And that actually happened because I was attending lots of football and I was seeing that it was so normal and it looked like it was fun. And I started, and very quickly I became a gambler who was, disordered. And I'm not surprised. I was being shown products that were addictive and being cross-sold products and told to play on them. So, I go to football a lot now and I see it. It's just unbelievable, the amount of, it's not just the shirt sponsors, it's everything. It's all around. And, it was me, my harm was with regulated companies. So, they're not safe at the moment, and that needs to be dealt with. But anyway, Brigid, I'd like to bring that over to you and see what your response to that might be.
Yes, I mean, I'm a passionate watcher of football too. I was a director of Leicester City Football Club. It's my hometown. And I am chairing a sponsorship working group, which is part of the Betting and Gaming Council, to look at this issue. The English Football League, we put about 40 million into the English Football League in terms of sponsorship. And particularly since they've lost many millions of pounds during the pandemic, I don't think now is the time. But more to the point, the University of Liverpool did a very clear study which made clear that actually the issue of advertising on shirts, or indeed advertising on the perimeter, was not something that caused problem gambling. So we are hoping, we have, as you probably know, a gambling review in the UK. I think the government will be looking at it. I hope that they will look very clearly at this as a case of evidence. Where I do think perhaps we need to make some changes is we have a whitelisting system in the UK. So we actually have an awful lot of of companies who are sponsoring football teams in the Premier League who have no interest in the UK market at all. They're interested in Kenya or other places in the world. I think we need to review that, and I think that actually only companies that are properly and fully regulated in the UK should be allowed to sponsor football teams. But there is more that we as an industry can do, and someone talked about not putting advertisements in family areas. We're absolutely clear that we don't do that. We now have 20% of all our gambling messages are safer gambling messages. There is more that we can do, but I'm not convinced that banning the sponsorship or putting your name on the back of shirts is actually the right answer.
Brilliant, thanks, Brigid. I mean, conversely, you would also look at the football index debacle, and they were on the front of shirts. But Thomas, I just wanted to invite you in very quickly on this one before we move on to the next one. Obviously, what with yourself working in the media?
Well, as a football fan and as a keen watcher of television, I think perhaps that gambling sponsorships is an integral part of the game. I don't think that many people who are watching the Premiership or any other football league are unaware of the presence of gambling companies on the commercial market. So, of course, as representing the media industry, we welcome regulated markets. We welcome advertisement with a high creative quality. But I don't think banning would be the answer, and definitely not post-pandemic. I mean, gambling companies are regulated, and they're part of a commercial ecosystem with sponsorship, money to charity organizations, investments in media, etc. So I think that you would have to balance all the interests. Saying that, of course, it's crucial to have a responsible relationship to the gambling industry and to the messages that they carry in our media channels.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Can I just one more quick comment on this, is that you've got to think about how that money is used. And that money is used by clubs not only for the education of their players, but also for wider information in their communities. So it's responsibility and the responsibility of the gambling company to make sure that that money is used properly.
Brilliant, thank you, Brigid. Moving on, so affiliate marketing, especially online streaming, is obviously a form of advertising and generates very handsome revenue for the industry, you might say. However, it is common knowledge that most streams and video uploads on streaming platforms such as Twitch and YouTube are not being age-gated. Further, many streams are not representative of the gameplay for the market that they're primarily selling into, particularly in the UK, which is essentially false advertising. And not only that, but we have seen affiliates of regulated casinos promoting play on unregulated cryptocurrency casinos. Why is this an area that seemingly continues to go under the radar, and what can and should be being done about it? Maybe if we start with Peter Paul on this one.
Yeah, so it's clearly unacceptable that there's no age gating on streams on the internet when there's gambling advertising concerned. Again, looking at the Dutch market, we are newly regulated, but you do see a tendency with politicians when they are discussing marketing and when they are looking at advertising, that they are looking at television and radio predominantly, and they do not consider the internet. Whilst we all know as online operators, the internet is, well, vastly bigger than television and radio, and that is where the vulnerable groups are exposed to advertising, sometimes for unlicensed offers, which are clearly dangerous, but sometimes also by affiliates that do not seem to be following the, let's say, local legislation and regulations. So the way that they resolve this in the Netherlands, or they hope they have resolved this in the Netherlands, is to make the operator primarily responsible. The operator will be faced with the consequences of any affiliate breaking any laws or regulations, and may have ultimately its license revoked. And I think that is a very apt system of regulating. But we, as the Netherlands Online Gambling Association, are also trying to entice affiliates to become members, to become B2B members, and by having them subscribe to our goals and our regulations, to basically bind them to strict adherence to law and regulations.
Brilliant, thank you. And I mean, looking into this, it's something that I'm really passionate about, and it does seem like a bit of a wild west out there with regards to affiliates. And Brigid, obviously, it's just been touched upon there by Peter Paul. We see a lot of this in the UK, and it would just seem that affiliate managers from operators are just turning a bit of a blind eye. What's your take on it?
Well, actually, you shouldn't be seeing it in the UK. The industry code in the UK, which is a requirement under LCCP, and also our ad tech code, we've worked with all the big platforms. YouTube are no longer showing, unless you can prove to the BGC that you have age gating that is over, that you can check that people are over the age of 25, then you cannot have that advertising to anyone who is under the age of 18. And Twitch, I think, announced in August they were removing that advertising. And I mean, a bit like Peter Paul said, it's actually up to our gambling companies to regulate their affiliates. The Gambling Commission has made absolutely clear that they have that responsibility. So we've actually taken a lot of action. I mean, I do think the unregulated market is much more difficult. We also have a negative word list, which is shared with all affiliates so that they know how to deal with it. So, to be honest, if that's the sort of thing that we're still seeing, then it should be reported, and one would hope that the authorities are doing something about it. But we've been very clear in working with our members that they can't do that.
Thanks, Brigid. I mean, I did want to ask you a second point with regards to this, because there does seem to be a lot of stuff that's been said both in this question and the question before with regards to the black market, which I for all of us, is a concern. Yeah. But there was a quote that you made in particular in January, which you state, this was on Sky Sports Racing: "I haven't met anyone who has experienced who has experience of gambling and with problems with gambling who has not participated in black market gambling." Now, not only does this suggest that anyone who gambles that you happened to have interacted with your role as chairman of the Betting and Gaming Council has played on black market sites, but it's common among us in the recovery community. We talk to one another, and we could name but a handful, and we're very open and honest about our previous experiences. So my question is to you: when are you going to stop with the diversionary tactics and accept that sometimes, unfortunately, it does happen that your members exacerbate harm, and what do you actually plan to do about that?
Well, first of all, I think that comment that I made was slightly misinterpreted. It was people who I had been meeting, and I hadn't met that many people, but I did meet people who said that even after they'd recovered from problems with gambling, that they were being besieged by sites in Curacao or wherever it was and dealing with it. So please don't hold me to that entirely. It was just the people I've met within that community, and I haven't met everybody, as you rightly say. But when the BGC was formed 2 years ago, we were quite clear that we had to raise standards, and we were quite clear with our members that we hadn't done enough. But during COVID, we had, first of all, we didn't do any advertising for 6 months. Then we had a 10-point plan. You have to have 20% of all your advertisements being social, safe at gambling messages, which I think is really important. And our members are intervening much more. And actually, we had something which was before my time, called When the Fun Stops, which a lot of people didn't like. We're about to replace it. But I think we also have to be careful about looking at the customers. And the customers and research we've done is that some people respond to hard-hitting messages and interventions, and some people say, this is not me, and I don't really have a problem with gambling. So actually what we're coming up with something is a nudge, and I think that's really important. It's about behavioural change and making sure people are reminded that they need to set deposit limits. They're reminded that they need to limit the amount of time that they're spending in gambling, and that our members are doing more and more. So I'm not sitting here arguing that we've been perfect. I think there's so much more that we need to do, but I will say that we've done a lot in that period of the last 2 years.
Thanks, Brigid. I mean, we must move on now. We've got a couple more questions, but I'd just like to point out what Ryan read out to you there was a word-for-word quote. So that was as it was. But our next question, and this is an open floor, but time's running low. So let's begin with Thomas on this one, and we'll get Hubert in as well. But can you give us some good examples of safer gambling advertising and the impact that they have had?
Well, I think in Sweden, where we have a fairly new regulated market, we've seen lots of advertisement which we didn't see before, and we have raised this issue within the Newspaper Association in Sweden. We have presented our own guidelines. I'd like to say, quoting what Facebook just told us, that regulation should be helpful and not harmful. And as a freedom of speech fundamentalist, I think there are two issues to point out in accordance with what I mentioned earlier, that we need a balance, that whenever you regulate advertisement, that's an intrusion of your freedom of speech. And me being representing traditional publishers, we have politicians all the day putting their fingers up and discussing what they want to regulate. And next, after the gambling industry, we might have regulations regarding advertisement for airlines, for cars, for food with sugar in, etc. That's a slippery slope to go. And you also need to consider that these are legal businesses, and they're part of the ecosystem, which I told you that money from gambling advertisements is reinvested in journalists in Kabul or TV coverage or the Premiership or whatever. So I think you have to balance all their interests. But saying that, we do try to take the responsibility. Publishers do not carry black market advertisements. We demand of our advertisement customers that they fulfill the requirements of our self-regulation conditions from the newspaper associations and so on. So I think that's important to mention as well, the wider picture here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll just say, is fulfilling the requirements enough when, gambling is a dangerous product? There is no doubt about it. But I'd just like to quickly move on now and go over to Hubert.
Yeah, well, I agree that we need to be really careful about how we, how the gambling industry markets itself on one side, because it needs to be fun for the customers, it needs to be safe for the customers, and I'm no expert by no means in that area, but what I do know is that if the providers in the sector reinvest in grassroots football, in the development of elite football, they have to have the responsibility to make some gambling safe on one side, and I personally believe to invest back that money or a part of that profit back into society as well. And that's the development that we see is going on now with the regulated providers. And always it could be better. Speaking from a grassroots level, it could be more. But I think to make the industry sustainable, people need to do a step more than what's legally needed to keep gambling safe and to keep in mind the well-being of their customers. And at the same time, they can do more in investing back to the community as well.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got one more question. Obviously, we are mindful of time. Perhaps our most important question to all of you, how can we create a sustainable customer journey where all the different touch points of customer encounters are coordinated to reinforce consumer protection? This is open floor, but let's start with Peter Paul.
Well, like the Dutch legislation and regulations, start with consumer protection. That's your starting point. If you take a consumer protection point as your starting point, then you're most likely to arrive at a, let's say, safe environment for all gamblers. And in the previous section, you were asking for an example. There is an example, and I don't like to give compliments to incumbents, but the Dutch State Lottery had an advertisement about how to gamble responsibly and know when to stop. And they gave some advice during the advertising section without advertising their brand all over. I think that's a nice example of advertising responsible gambling. Consumer protection centricity is key for a successful, responsible gambling advertising.
Thanks, Peter, Paul, and I agree. It's very important to not have your branding on that kind of advertising. So I think that's really good to hear. Brigid, we've got about a minute left. Could we come over to you, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think this is about understanding your customers, knowing what interventions work. There's been a lot of work done in the UK looking at that. I still think we need to do some more. And I think the other thing you need to think about, the same thing for one customer is not the same message that works for others. But I think by intervening more, by encouraging people, so 14% more people set deposit limits after interventions that we've done in this country in the last few months. I think we just need to do a lot more of that. But I also think we need to continue to talk about this. We've got to be really careful that we don't demonise gambling as if it's something hidden. And coming as I did from the alcohol industry, when your children go off to university, you talk about how much you drink. We need to make sure that we're talking to people so they understand that you're not hiding away in a room and doing something that is very individualistic and not as obvious to spot. So much more we need to do, but we work with the charities. As you probably know, we have pledged to give £100 million by 2023. We work with, we need to do more with our National Health Service. Lots more to be done, but it is a journey we all need to face.
Thanks, Brigid. And yeah, I mean, we do agree a lot more most definitely does need to be done. But we've got to leave it there. It's been really fantastic talking to you all. So yeah, from me and Ryan, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And from my behalf, I also thank all the panelists and Ryan and Christopher. I really hope we can do this again. Thank you very much and well done.